दाइ हामी अलिकति कन्क्रिट दिने थियो नि दाइ यो विषयमा चाहिँ यो विषयमा क्लाइमेट चेन्ज हेरिटेज
But when we do the Q&A, you are most welcome to speak in Nepali, and where possible, I will also switch back between Nepali and English. So as we begin, maybe we can close the doors. And Civil Aviation, Venerable Metea Sakiputa, Vice Chair of the Lumbini Development Trust, representatives from the Department of Archaeology and Department of National Parks and Wildlife Conservation. We are very happy to have you to present the learnings of the next 50 dialogues. As most of you know, because of 2022, marking the 50th anniversary of the 1972 World Heritage Convention. And this event, this final dialogue, as we like to call it, is actually our 20th dialogue. And so, as you can imagine, over the course of this year, we've had many learnings, and we've invited you here today to share them. Also, we would like to say that although this event is the final dialogue, UNESCO, the UNESCO office in Nepal will be carrying forward all the learnings and recommendations into the future, the next 50 years. And so please do not think that things will end here. And that is why also today we've invited you here for a moderated dialogue session as part of this event so that we can get some more learnings and input from you all. We will start today by, with a small and very short video presentation made by my colleague Monica. And then we'll go into a visual presentation of all of our learnings. Kathmandu Valley and Lumbini. The interactive sessions that we did, well, we interacted with 2,271 students and 97 schools across 8 different districts. We've had 100 plus learnings and recommendations, and over 30 hours of discussions. I'd like to mention now that all of our learnings and recommendations will be uploaded to a digital platform which will be available to all at the end of this year, and we will share that with you shortly. We are in the process of trying to find the right platform. So I will now start with the learnings and recommendations. So our structures, monuments, and we had a lot of feedback, as you can imagine, about tangible heritage. The authenticity, originality, and essence. I think this is quite self-explanatory. It means that when we restore or conserve, we have to pay attention to make sure that we build back with respect to what was there before, not just build back better. Number two would be to identify and record heritage sources. We have a vast amount of heritage that covers a large breadth of intangible and tangible, and not a lot of it is recorded. So a lot of people pointed out that we should have a platform that can record all of these learnings. The third point, which is design, is in all aspects of how the World Heritage Sites are run. Number four, we couldn't resist putting in managing the monkey population, because so many of the site managers complained about how the monkeys are constantly interfering and meddling with the World Heritage Sites. So, but of course in a very humane way, you know. This has to be looked at and monitored very carefully to make sure that urban encroachment is not something that interferes with the World Heritage Site. Number six is to prioritize authentic material measures of the World Heritage Sites brought up and we're very concerned by. Number seven is to maintain proper drainage and sanitation. Most of the World Heritage Sites have problems with flooding and all around Nepal, but of course in the World Heritage Sites it's particularly painful. Number nine is to enhance, this was actually pointed out by an urban architect. She said that it's very important to enhance public space, which should be the spine that connects the tangible and intangible. So the space between the World Heritage Site and the urban area outside of it should be managed in such a way that it becomes an asset, not a liability. Number 10 would be to improve the built environment around the World Heritage Site. That's a follow-up to number 9, which is to enhance the public areas. And yeah, that is the last point for the tangible heritage aspect of the learnings that we've had. Information and communication, something that UNESCO is very much involved in across the board, intersectorally. We've had a lot of feedback on what we should be doing in terms of how we can manage information and communication. Number 1, enhance public awareness regarding the importance of heritage and tourism. When we have the sustainable profit by, and this is not correct actually, tourism is something that should trickle down and should benefit at a grassroots community level, and if managed properly this can be done. And so this is what it means, is to enhance public awareness regarding the importance of heritage and tourism and how tourism can contribute to heritage, and sustainable tourism in general as a model is something that should be practiced. Going on to number 2, involve. So we have to involve the media to help collaborate and report on cultural issues and to raise awareness of heritage preservation, and we have to involve the media and facilitate them to help them report on issues to do with science and the natural World Heritage Sites, because the issues around the natural World Heritage Sites are constantly underreported, and often the Nepal Field of Science journalists pointed out that they are dealing with secondary sources and not primary sources when they report on the natural World Heritage Sites, which is a problem for them when it comes to accurate reporting, and they don't have contact with the actual community members who are being affected. So this really resonated with us, and this is what this means. And of course the media in general can really contribute to proper reporting and dissemination of issues in and around the World Heritage Sites, as well as positive public interest stories. Number 3 is to connect people to their culture. Often when we ask people what the World Heritage Sites mean to them, people said, yes, it means something, but they were not really able to elaborate on what it meant to them. And that's because of a certain disconnect between them and the sites themselves. And we have 4 sites in Nepal at the moment, and not everybody lives near the sites. And so that means that if they have not visited the site, they don't really have an emotional connection to them, which does not help with conservation efforts. And so it's really important to create a connection between the stakeholders and the sites, because ideally every person is a stakeholder of the World Heritage Site, not just in Nepal, but all over the world. Going on to number 4 is communicating to all audiences, which is a follow-up to number 3, which is to connect people to their culture. And then number 5 is using storytelling. Storytelling is the through line through all the learnings we've had. One really great way to connect people to their cultural heritage is by storytelling, and not just throwing facts at people, but creating stories around why things are important. Number 6 is to ensure proper and accurate information is being disseminated, not just about the sites. One example that we found is that in school books, the school books say that we have 10 World Heritage Sites in Nepal, whereas actually it is 4 World Heritage Sites. And in the Kathmandu Valley World Heritage Site, there are 7 monument zones. So somehow it's been taken to add up to 10 World Heritage Sites in general. So often there's a dissemination of information that is inaccurate, and that needs to be rectified. Going on to number 7, this is a request directly from our consultations with indigenous peoples. They have requested that signage in the World Heritage Sites area should include local languages and indigenous languages, not just Nepali and English, because it shows the presence of the people in the area, and it gives them ownership of the sites as well. So we felt that this was a very important point. Number 8 is an interesting point that came up during a conversation about creative cities and the cultural industry and how it can contribute to sustainable tourism, both domestic and international tourism. People felt that Nepal is a very creative place and many things are happening, but there's no common platform where people can post all the happenings, whether it's film, music, food, art, poetry, and all of the different things that are happening right now. And if there were to be a common platform where people could say, this is what's happening, then it would be a really great way to consolidate information and to bring more footfall to all of these events in general. So this is a request from the creative industry, and it's a great idea. It doesn't have to be a magazine, it could be a website as well. Number 9 is to avoid disrupting information when transferring to digital. This came from one of our digital transformations dialogues. And what this means is almost everything is digital now, but when we transfer from analog to digital, we need to be very careful that the information is transferred correctly and not misrepresented. And number 10 is actually a follow-up to number 9. Validate reliable sources of information to ensure accurate dissemination across media. Often, information is disseminated, but it's not cross-checked. We have a captive audience, and if we are able to utilize that opportunity to also... Number 2 is to disseminate knowledge and information on culture and heritage to broader community, not just to local communities. This is something that also came up repeatedly, and I mentioned this before. Often what happens is only the people in and around the sites are aware of the importance of the sites and the importance of culture and the importance of conservation, natural and cultural. So information not just to stakeholders who are close to the sites, but to everybody, because again, as I said, we are all stakeholders when it comes to World Heritage. Number 3 is to use indigenous languages in teaching. Again, a request from consultations with the indigenous people. Number 4 is to use stories and anecdotes. Again, like something that has come up repeatedly as the most useful way of delivering information to people in a memorable way. And this can also be done through the curriculum if we are creative. Number 5 is to provide college courses on traditional architecture and building techniques. One concern that came up is that often conservation is treated as a vocational training and not necessarily as a technical training at a higher level in colleges, and so this is something that can be rectified and needs to be thought about. And number 7 is to instill heritage as a sentimental value. This is a direct follow-up to number number 4, which is to use stories and anecdotes to be able to create emotional attachments to. Will present the remaining 3 boards of learnings.
These are just the key learnings that we've gathered from all the different learnings that we've had through all the consultation sessions, and we do believe it's really important to share some of our key learnings. Conversations regarding the linkage between heritage tourism, sustainability and biodiversity, and to include indigenous people, local communities in conversations related to those. Number 2 is to understand the needs of adjacent communities. As Sophia had mentioned in the previous slide as well, it is important to include the communities surrounding the heritage site as well. There have been observations where there is some form of disconnect or miscommunication between the community members as well as the officials who are working towards contributing towards the heritage conservation. So they're a very important stakeholder and we need to consider their needs and wants when we talk about heritage conservation. Number 3 is to provide training for sustainable livelihood for local community members around the World Heritage Site. This point was brought up when we had a consultation with our indigenous peoples and youth in Lumbini, and what they mentioned was it is extremely important to provide, and so it's really important to do so. And also one point that they brought up was if there's no capacity building training, it's also difficult for the indigenous people and the local communities to identify what their needs and wants are as well. So number 4 is research. Of course, research is important for anything. So for that, the impact of tourism on wildlife is also one point that was brought up, which is, World Heritage Sites, as you may all know, people come from all over the world to visit these sites. So it's extremely important to understand the impact of tourism in the sites as well, and especially in terms of National Heritage Site. This was also brought up when we had a conversation in specifically focusing on the National World Heritage Sites, where the impact of tourism on wildlife is so huge and it should be considered that there should be more research done on that. Development, it is important to seek for other alternative energy sources, a shift from fossil fuels to other alternative energy sources that are more environment friendly. And number 6 is factoring climate change, heritage, and heritage preservation into policy. So it should come from the policy level itself, the changes. And number 7, every heritage site is unique, and there are issues and challenges that are overlapping between different heritage sites, but there are some unique challenges and issues that has to be addressed in terms of tourism, the increase in tourism in every site. And so a sustainable tourism guidelines and framework that can be utilized by various stakeholders would be extremely important, that is specific to every site. So that is one important point that was brought up during one of our consultation sessions. Number 8 is, of course, prohibiting single-use plastics, and one recommendation that we received from our consultation was why not use the traditional way of doing things. So going back to utilization of within the heritage site area and also surrounding communities. Next, I'll be talking a little bit more about the role of government. So first point is to enhance coordination and dialogue amongst government, private, public sector and communities. Lack of coordination sometimes, and also between, not just amongst different sectors, but also amongst the different government levels. So there is a need to have enhanced better coordination amongst all the government levels as well as the various different sectors. And number 2 is educating civilians and officials on climate change and heritage conservation, which is also extremely important. Number 3 is, of course, this is a given, promoting and preserving local culture and heritage. A lot of times government maybe is focusing more on infrastructure development, and but also, of course, infrastructure development is indeed important, but it is also equally important to focus on local heritage, local culture and heritage and its preservation. And number 4 is to ensure government is monitoring correct information about heritage sites, linking up to what Sophia had mentioned previously. There's a lot of misinformation, disinformation about heritage sites, and it is the government's role also to monitor correct information about heritage sites is being disseminated. And number 5 is allocation of budget, which is a huge, which was an issue that was also brought up during our technical session. Of course, a lot of allocation of budget is prioritized for their spending on. It has actually helped in growing the economy of the sites as well as the surrounding communities of the site. And number 8 is supporting traditional arts and craft, as mentioned earlier, to the preservation of intangible. Not correct information being disseminated. A lot of websites out there. If the government can come up with a portal that has all the correct information, which is updated in a timely manner, that will really help the public. So this was brought up also in our mini session, where there's sometimes disputes between the local communities as well as the heritage committee. So if there are better policies and regulations in terms of buying and landing, it also helps with the preservation of the areas around the sites. And number 11 is providing greater transparency around issues in the World Heritage Site. Of course, if the government can provide better transparency, that will help in disseminating better information to the public and everyone else as well. And number 12 is ensuring that urban development does not encroach on World Heritage Site. Okay, this is the last slide. So I'll be talking about technology, and it's establishing more accessible and effective navigation systems like virtual guides, billboards around World Heritage Site, including VR headsets, which would only maybe for the tourists it's more convenient, and also but it would be good using technology, but we also have to ensure that this does not really affect the OUV, the outstanding universal value of the sites. So that needs to be taken into consideration as well. Number 1 that I missed out, it is acceptance of culture of digitalization, crowdsourcing, and open data. So this topic was brought up during our consultation when we were talking to experts and people who work in the digital field and technological field. What they mentioned is there's a lot of, there are some reservations in terms of using open crowdsourcing and open data, but it's also a great way to gather a lot of information that might not be accessible. So we need to be a little more open on that. And number 3 is establishing more accessible and effective, Number to other digital platforms. This was particularly brought up during our digital transformation session with our Huawei students who were there to talk about their input, to give their input on how youth can basically help in the dissemination of incorporation of technology through creative ways in terms of heritage conservation. And number 5 is gamification, another thing that would maybe also help gain more interest from the youth if there are other creative ways to